Hey, Joanna.
Oh, hey, Jen.
Tonight we have a very special guest. Her name is Sabrina Nettles, and she is a,
She has been very requested.
yes, indeed, and she is a sexual empowerment coach. Sabrina, welcome to our show.
Hi, hello. Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you. In fact, I don't know if all of our listeners are listening in order, but we did one episode about sexuality and we kind of alluded to the idea that you were going to, I think it was episode, Joanna, what episode was that?
Episode
Episode,
7. It's the
yeah.
one I pretended to my family didn't exist, but everyone else I told them they should listen.
So we alluded to the idea that we would be having a special guest around this topic, and it's one of my favorite episodes. So I'm really excited, as is Joanna, to get into it with you and talk about all things sexuality without shame, which actually is the name of Sabrina's website, and we will put that in the notes later. But Sabrina, give us a little idea of your background and what you do.
Okay, my background. I was actually trying to think of this earlier. So my background is actually in public health and in HIV and STI prevention. So I have been doing that, I realized, for 2 decades, which was a fun milestone to reach. And so then recently I have turned kind of all of that, knowledge and education into my sexual empowerment coaching program. Being in public health, I felt like I got to do really good work, but I really wanted to start working directly with women and kind of taking everything I've learned, and I've had to learn for myself and I've had to learn for work, and I've just had to learn to survive in general, and kind of actually start having one-on-one sessions with people to discuss sex and sexuality and how we don't have to feel bad about really liking it.
That's great because I really like it. And I think everybody that has sex should really like it. Otherwise, what?
Yes, yes. If we could be all having sex we like, I would love it because we can be having a lot of sex. And
Well,
that's different from having sex that we really like.
agree. So, in your journey towards becoming a coach,
hmm
can you give us a little insight into like what prompted you to get into this particular field?
So the way I like initially got into it was just rather by happenstance. I knew I wanted to go into like public health, psychology, things like that. So when I was in college, I worked in our health psychology laboratory and worked on and actually published articles on how to get teenage girls to use condoms. And so that kind of snowballed from there. And then the coaching actually kind of started when I myself realized, I've been doing this work for 20 years, and it was only in my mid 30s that like I started being able to get into BDSM and getting into kink and getting comfortable with that and even getting comfortable talking about more of those things. And
Pause.
so
Can you tell our listening
oh,
community, I know, what is BDSM?
yes, sorry. And I actually always forget what the like actual acronym is, but it is, what is the B?
Well, even if you don't give us the actual acronym, which I'll look up while you're telling us what
Okay.
it
Well,
is.
I know that the D is domination, S is submission,
Bondage,
and
babes. It's bondage, discipline, dominance,
bondage.
and submission, sadomasochism. So they have more words than letters because you can just make
Yes.
a salad of them all.
I was like, I always think like I should just know this by heart, and yet this is something I've had to talk with my friends with where I'm like, I just use these words and I forget
But it's okay.
that.
'Cause we get it. It's the meaning is the most important part. So,
Yes.
so we're talking about, and kink similarly, if you want to just give us a quick idea of what kink is for someone who might not.
Yeah. So kink is, I kind of like to think of it as those risque parts of sex. We see sex on TV and it's very, you know, mom and dad fall in love and they want to make a baby. And I think of kink as kind of anything outside of that because it really depends on who you are. And something I consider kinky, somebody else might consider like just plain vanilla. something I consider plain vanilla, somebody else might think of as kinky. So I like to think of it as that, like what you think of as really risque.
Yes.
Great. I love that there's such a spectrum of sexual everything, sexual content, sexual identity, sexual preference. There's such a spectrum in every realm of sexuality, and there's so much to explore. And so I'm so excited that you're on the show, because we'd love to hear some ideas of what you think some of the most important topics are for exploring your sexuality and becoming comfortable with your sexuality.
And to that end, we are going to have a lot of questions, because after episode 7, I got so many text messages saying, first of all, you need to follow up and have the expert on that you teased. Secondly, you have to ask a lot of questions, because we want this to be less clinical and more the chats you have with your girlfriends when you think no one's listening. So, my
Yes.
first question, Sabrina,
hmm
did you feel like you were finding your own peace and comfort with your sexuality before you started doing the coaching? Or was that a side effect of you doing the coaching? Did you go first and then teach it? Or did you teach it and go along with them?
I went first. I had some not sexually related things happen, but just some things happened last year where I really had to start taking a look at my connection to myself, my connection to my body, my mental health, my well-being. Um, and as I was going on this journey, I kept hearing from so many people, Sabrina, you're so empathetic. Your ability to talk to people, and I really, even though I'm very cynical, still also like to believe that everybody has their best intentions, even when maybe the outcome isn't great. And so part of the coaching did come from, I'm learning all of these things and I really want to share them. And there are things that, again, having been doing sexual health and research and all of this for 20 years, I was just realizing now. And so my brain kept going. If I'm just realizing this now, if I'm just getting comfortable with this now, like, how is anybody else
Yeah.
learning to navigate this? Because it's just like, and I like that you mentioned kind of chatting, because that's what I like to do and kind of think of my coaching. There's education, there's comfortability, there's knowledge, but also so many times we just don't have anybody to talk to about it. Even your best friend, even your husband that you've been with for 20 years, but it's so ingrained in us that sex is
Shame, a secret, all of
yes,
it,
and you
taboo,
can't talk about it and you
right?
can't acknowledge it, and if you even acknowledge it, then people are going to do it, and what if people do it? And then I'm like, and what if they do?
Yeah.
But it's the fear of judgment. It's that fear that like you're
Yes.
weird or that you're perverted or any of those words that just make us feel uncomfortable with ourselves when
Yeah.
we're put on this earth to like explore and love and be excited about what we're doing. And there's so much that we've been taught through generations of, sometimes it's religion that makes you feel this way, or sometimes it's a familial thing where, you're just not discussing that in the home, or,
Yeah.
just are, especially as women, and many of our listeners are women. And we love when our men listen as well, because I think there's a lot to be learned about women from this show. One of the things that you and I spoke about, and that we were hoping we can sort of bring up right away, was when we talked about the vaginal orgasm myth.
Yes, that is my favorite myth, but also my least favorite because it is so pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something that I talk about all the time where I'm like, the vagina, a woman's vagina, is not her main sex organ. Some people will say it's the clitoris, some people will say it's the brain, some people will say it's the skin. But your vagina is not where you get your pleasure, but the vagina is
Men.
where the man gets pleasure. And
Yes.
for so long, sexual health, sexuality, and everything has been studied from the male perspective. So we see quote unquote normal sex as a penis and a vagina. But the vagina is not where women get their pleasure. And so then what happens is women have trouble orgasming, they have trouble feeling excited, and they feel like something is wrong with them. And what I always say is there's nothing wrong with you, the messaging is wrong.
Yes.
And
And the
so,
vagina gets beat up, Sabrina.
oh
Let's
my
be
gosh,
real.
I heard
You
you
have
two
some
talking about
babies.
having kids.
You have some
Yes.
babies. You have your period every month. Like there are crime scenes that happen there too. It is not
Yes.
just your carnival that the penis might be all the time.
Yes. Yes. When I heard you two, and I have not had children, so obviously I don't know it physically myself, but I am a woman in my late 30s. All of my friends have had children. And so when you were talking about, trying to get on the trampoline, but you pee a little bit, and it's like, yeah, like the vagina is a great, wonderful organ, but at the same time, the clitoris and the brain are really the two organs that should be the most engaged while you're having sex. And I think, as I talk about the brain too, going into a bit of a different topic, oftentimes I hear from people that they kind of dissociate, they stay disconnected. And that is something, Jen, when you said, what do I think is most important? And I want, people to really know is that sex is about connecting not only with someone else, but with yourself and really loving yourself. And the thing I tell everybody to do is learn what you like. Touch yourself, play, have fun. Sex is fun. And the more you learn what you like, the more you'll be able to ask for it, tell people, feel comfortable in it, and then kind of be able to tap into that pleasure that your body can really provide you if you allow yourself to connect to it, which I feel like shame does not always allow us to do because we don't talk about it.
I'm
Right.
glad you said shame because I love that something you're committed to is helping people figure out the shame they have surrounding sex and then unlearn that. What is the biggest, if somebody walked away with one thing from this episode today and they had that ingrained societal, cultural, familial, experiential shame, whatever it was that resulted, that brought them here, what is the first step to unlearning the shame?
The first step, oh man, and I have spent months, I kid you not, trying to narrow this down into like the one point. Um, but truly, oh,
There
I
doesn't have to
forgot.
be one, but you can
Well,
give
no, my brain just forgot the question. I was like, I had it, and then
well, I guess Joanna was asking, like, what would you want our listeners to have as their biggest
oh,
takeaway from this particular episode?
yes.
And
From
we will have,
unlearning shame.
right, we will have more opportunities to talk about this, but just for this one episode, give us a nugget that they can walk away with, and then we'll maybe explore that a little further in this episode.
I would say your body is made for pleasure, and pleasure is your birthright.
Okay.
Yes.
And do not deny your body the inherent pleasure and the inherent goodness of your sexuality. We were
That
born with it.
that's a good nugget. I like that. Let's
Yeah.
explore that. I like that because I want to go back into what you were saying just a few minutes ago about exploring your body. And this is a big topic of shame. I think even more so in my own experience, at least. And I think I speak for a lot of women, but talking about masturbation and
Mm-hmm.
getting to it and feeling comfortable enough to like pick up a toy for yourself or anything that comes with like finding time to masturbate or finding time to pleasure your body or even explore your body, even if you're not just fully masturbating and you're just looking in the mirror and trying to like make peace with your body.
Yeah.
All of that comes with a tremendous amount of shame for many women.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I would love to delve into because I know that's something that you talk about in your practice. It's on your website, is something that you focus on when you're
Yes.
helping people break through their shame barriers.
Yeah. And I think masturbation is where I like people to start, but it is also sometimes the hardest part because it does really involve seeing yourself and feeling yourself in a way that for so long maybe you were told you shouldn't. Like I always think of when a child is 4 or 5 and maybe they're touching their penis and a parent goes, no, 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 don't touch that. They're not trying to stop their child from feeling sexual or any, but it's an ingrained reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but what happens is then as a child, you learn that's bad, don't touch that. And so I also tell people start really, really slow. A lot of, sexual empowerment coaches, pleasure coaches, things like that, they recommend looking at your vagina, taking pictures, blah, blah, blah. I say that as like a very end, because that's seeing yourself in a way that I think people are so not used to. But start with like rubbing your hand on your arm and feeling what that feels like to just have a light touch on your arm. Feel what it feels like to run your hands like over your own breasts and just really connect to your body in a way that feels safe and feels really comfortable. And then take those teeny tiny steps. Um, because I don't ever want somebody to try out the gate, take a picture of your vagina, look at it, and then fall apart and feel like I failed and now I can't go back. And so I really champion, it might seem silly, but just really like giving yourself that loving caress and then, moving to some other places. And then maybe you find a little video and then maybe you turn the lights out and you really slowly build up to it, which I think we should all be doing in a lot of sex anyways.
Yes.
But I think that is a really important part, is to really start with connecting to yourself and what feels good in almost a non-sexual way, and then leading into the sexual way, because we deny ourselves pleasure. I don't know what it is, but it's something we love to do. And so even just allowing yourself that pleasure of feeling your own body in an intimate, non-sexual way,
Yes.
and letting yourself feel that without feeling bad, because there's also that, which is a lot harder. I work on also like reframing messages a lot, because it's easy for me to say, but it's very difficult to do.
I like that you said that we were meant to feel good, that it's our birthright. When Jen and I lead our course, Best Life Ever,
Mhm.
we talk about the only reason we've ever desired anything in our whole lives. The whole reason we started this podcast was to really share with people whatever you're dreaming of is possible. There are no barriers except the limitations of our imagination.
Mhm.
So there are things that we just ascribe to with faulty premises. And especially coming from this spiritual world, let's say, I remember I had to work on my resolving the fact that you could have the spiritual professional pursuit and still pursue financial wealth, that those two weren't mutually exclusive.
Mhm.
And I love now that it's extending to, you could be a spiritually peaceful, powerful person and have a really active, healthy, vibrant sex life unapologetically. I remember my mom looking at me strangely when my daughter was born and she was on the changing table. She was really little. And my mom looks at me and just started laughing because she sticks her hands in her diaper. And I started telling her, "Oh, that's yours to explore. Let's just wait till, you have some privacy."
Yes, yes. Which I wish we could all say to children, because, and this might shock some listeners, so feel free to say this or take this out. But, I have a vivid memory of being like 5, and I used to hide under the bed because I have 4 siblings and it was the only way to get away. And I remember one day I started like rubbing. I was like laying on my belly and I just kind of started rubbing, and it just felt good. And it wasn't sexual, but it was like, I'm young and you can tell that it feels good. And then as we get older, we're taught to disconnect ourselves from that inherent piece of us, that at 5 I was like, I don't know what this is, but like it feels nice. Um
I'm so here for that story, and I'll tell you specifically. I remember the first time I ever discovered my clitoris.
yes.
I didn't know I had one. I didn't know what it was. I've told our listeners this before. I came from an Italian Catholic family. Sex before marriage was even sort of like, the idea was, oh my God, even though like in reality that doesn't happen as often as it used to back in the old days.
Yes.
But
The
sex
clitoris and angels
Right.
sang.
Sex is a real topic of not, I don't know that my mother would have been totally opposed to discussing it with me, but I never felt comfortable to talk about it with anyone. So I didn't know the most basic stuff. I didn't know what like to expect of a period when I got it at 12. I thought it was just a few drops of blood because that's what I was told. I
Yeah.
never felt comfortable to ask those questions. So I remember my parents were divorced. My dad took us on a trip to Fire Island, and it was the house that we were staying in had an adjustable shower head, and I was like, "Oh, this is fun." 13-year-old me, da, 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 singing in the rain. And then I put the shower head down below to wash, and I was like, "Woo, what's that sensation?" Brand new. But I spent about an hour and a half in the shower that day.
Yeah.
Nah.
Oh, yeah.
And that was my first experience with anything like that. And I was like completely dumbfounded by what was happening, even though I knew what sex was, but I didn't know that that's what would happen to me.
Because nobody tells you the pleasure part. It was like, Jen, clitoris, clitoris, Jen. You learn birds and the bees, you learn pollination, you learn reproduction. You
Yeah.
don't learn pleasure. And when you do, as you point out, Sabrina, it is so male focused that you might think for years. I've had friendships that are so old and had people say 20 years in, I've still never had an orgasm. Or have a friend
Absolutely.
who blew my mind. Someone in my world has one every single time she has sex, and she doesn't have sex that often. I'm like, I don't understand you, because if that was my situation, I don't think I would do anything else. You're a unicorn. That is amazing.
Well,
I
Sabrina, that's something that I really wanted to talk about. What do we do for people that are having trouble finding their orgasm?
Yes, especially the
Mm.
vaginal one. Are there
Yes.
tricks?
This is really, really difficult because, again, something I struggle with often is, women who are in relationships with men and maybe they're not comfortable with bringing toys in. Maybe their partner is not comfortable with some of that. And so to get like technical, if you can
Yes.
find a position, even if you're being penetrated, but where your clitoris is able to be rubbed, or if you can take your own hand, rub it, take your partner's hand, rub it, that friction is really going to help. And I also have a friend who is like, put a penis inside me and in 10 minutes I'm orgasming, and I want to ask her her secrets.
Yes.
But the secret is that it's just bodies. And
I think it's where her friction's positioned,
yeah,
don't you?
I have only had a vaginal orgasm with 3 of my sex partners, and I have had exponentially more than 3. And so there is that part of it where some of it is just bodies. Like I can't necessarily will myself to have a vaginal orgasm, but I'm also lucky enough to have partners where I can feel comfortable saying, I got to get out a toy. I need you to rub my clit, or, things like that.
Or you could use the friction and have the other kind
Yes.
while being penetrated and have both things
Yes.
happen at once.
Yes. And then, hopefully everybody can be happy. But I think a big part of it too is not being afraid to maybe even just play with yourself afterwards. Maybe, and I know this can be very difficult for some people when just sometimes partners are not very okay with that. But, say you got to take a shower to get everything off, and then you want to take it alone because, sex can get a little sticky. So say you got to go hop in the shower and then take something in there with you.
Now, I want to do a little rapid fire with you because I think these.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Yeah. And don't worry, there are no wrong answers, just dirty
Yeah.
ones.
All right.
Dirty ones without shame. So fun, dirty
Okay.
ones.
Yes.
Okay.
Dirty clean.
Boring. Dirty, dirty.
Okay.
Sabrina, question
Yes.
1. Jade eggs. Are you about that life? And if so, why?
I have not tried them, but that is because I have not had a child, so I am not super worried about my pelvic floor yet.
Yeah. Okay.
But from what I have heard from most people, the older I get, I will be looking into them, and I have heard most people say that they do recommend them. So I'm pro whatever works for you. I'm pro.
I got one in my closet from our last episode. I was inspired and I forgot to try it. So now you guys are going to inspire me
You
to
have to
try it and report back.
Yes.
Okay, next question. Are we pro porn or are we anti porn as a regular thing?
Absolutely pro porn. Period. Pro paying for your porn, pro finding feminist porn and porn by female directors, but we are pro porn however you can find it. Well, no, that is not however you can find it. There are some places you shouldn't find it, but
I like it. Now, here's a question. What are your thoughts on feeling there's a comfort level disconnect between one partner and the other? Let's say one is feeling super freaky deaky and the other one's more plain Jane. How do they find their middle? How do they find that compromise?
That one is really tough, to be honest. If I am working with somebody who is single, my question is, why would you be with someone who is not sexually compatible with you? That is one of the main reasons why people divorce, is because we try to ignore it. If you are in a relationship, I think that is the time where the tough conversations have to start happening. You have to be able to find, I always say the right amount of sex is what works for you and your partners. And there needs to be those if you're going to be with someone for a long time, you gotta be able to talk to them. And the uncomfortable follow-up to that is, if you can't, then I ask again, what are we doing?
Yes.
But that, it's easier when to talk to people about that before they even get into the relationship or in the early dating phases. And I think it's also taking this as seriously as it should be, in a way where, obviously I say sex should be fun and great and it's pleasure seeking. It is also a really big part of your relationship with someone. And it's a part that I don't think should be ignored and should be worked on, and in a way where you can reach a point where both or all, if you're, not in a monogamous relationship, can find a way to be satisfied. That's a hard question.
Yeah.
You answered it beautifully. What are your thoughts on monogamy versus? Well, I shouldn't say versus, because it's not versus, but what are your thoughts on monogamy and maintaining a monogamous relationship and keeping the excitement alive?
I think that it goes back to what I said before. We have to keep working at it. One thing I've been talking with people about a lot is this concept of scheduling sex, and how it seems so, quote unquote, unsexy, and it seems so sterile. But when you're going on a date, before you're married, before, the kids and the laundry, you actually got prepared for sex well before the sex happened, because you knew you were going on a date. You did your everything shower. You put
Yep.
on your nice clothes. And so the sex actually happened, like the sex started happening much earlier in the day. And so
It started when you matched your bra and panties.
exactly. And you started thinking about where the day was going to go. And so if you're in a, 1, 2, 5, 7, 70-year long relationship, life is going to get really busy. And so you have to find a way to keep putting in the work. I think there's this author I love. Her name is Emily Nagoski. She wrote kind of what I consider my Bible. And she talks about approaching your sexuality with a warm curiosity and a sense of like joy and play. And so I think if you're in a long-term relationship and you can start looking at sex as something playful, like in the episode you had mentioned, Joanna, that you got the games. And I
Yes.
think that's actually a great way to, even if it's once a year and it's not something you do regularly, but to find something new about like, how fun is it to keep
Yes.
finding out something new about people that you thought you knew your whole life, or, for 20 years. And so just try to bring that sense of warm curiosity, joy, play, and fun. And don't be afraid to get intimate with your partner. That's why they're your partner. Well, hopefully. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but I'm looking for somebody who wants to split the rent. That's my form of intimacy.
Yeah. The game was cool, Sabrina, because it made the other thing that happens when you're in a long-term monogamous relationship is, if you do listen and you pay attention, you start to know what does it for them, which buttons to press. So because you know that, you may go straight to your cliff notes. And
Yes.
sometimes you don't want the cliff notes. Sometimes you want the 4 play, the 5 play, the 6 play, and
Yes.
they're offering a 1 play or a 2 play. So when you
Yes.
have something playful like the game, it slows it down, takes you back 5 steps, makes you rediscover the stages you tend to skip when you want to go straight to the end of the movie.
Yes.
I'm so glad you
Yes.
brought that up. I remember we spoke about this in our earlier episode about sexuality and sex, but most men and maybe even some women don't know, and everyone in between, I don't want to exclude anyone, but there's a very specific amount of, I guess, warming up that some people need.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's what I think is sometimes a taboo topic, because I think with male female relationships, there's an expectation that because the man is ready, the woman should be ready. And I would imagine in relationships where it's two women, there's much more of an understanding of the warm up period. With two men, you don't have to worry about that because they're pretty much ready to go right
Yeah.
away.
Yes.
And there's all different, like, there's all different levels of what requires someone to warm up. So if you're in a relationship and your partner doesn't know how
How to
much,
love you like a lesbian.
yes, yes, how do you sort of keep the foreplay going when they're like ready and they just don't think they can hold it anymore?
Well, I think that is where the partner who is always ready to take a little bit of a step back. I really like the way somebody put it, where they were saying, in a relationship, it is your responsibility as well to care for your partner. And so just because you are ready, just because you want it all the time, you also have a responsibility to meet your partner a little bit where they're at. Everybody needs to give and take. And I feel like, and I talk about this a lot, there is a sense that a healthy sexuality is a sex that happens often, and and it's always great. I could have sex every day if I wanted to. It would be great, but I also have never been in a relationship longer than 5 years, so I don't know what it's like after that. But as that person, it's up to me to understand that my partner is not always like, if my partner says no, they're not rebuffing me. They're not saying no to me. There is nothing wrong with me. And then we can say, hey, that's where the scheduling comes in. Hey, well, what about tomorrow? And then maybe I can send them a sexy text during the day, and I, as the person who has the higher libido, can be the one to get them in the mood, knowing that they need a little bit more than just that right here, right now.
I love that.
Because it's just as, I think oftentimes we think of the one person who always wants sex, and then the person who doesn't want it all the time. That person is the one that has to change. They have to want more. No, you have to want less. They have to want more, and we have to find a place in the middle. It is not just expecting them to come up to your level.
That is so deep, sister. I'm so
Yeah.
happy you said that.
Because then it's a chore. Then it's a chore for that person. You're shaming them. You're making them wrong. You're saying they don't have enough desire for you.
Yeah. Like, imagine if, and I think about this, like, if I'm sitting there and pestering someone to do something, they're not going to want to do it. They're going to be like, you're just annoying me. But if I say, hey, I really want to connect with you, what day works for you? And then I take the responsibility to help them get in the mood and to help them want to be in the mood. Hey, that works for both of us. Like, I get something out of it. They get to feel good. They get to feel loved. And I think that is also part of really getting to know your partner. How does your partner respond? Are they somebody who needs a little bit more time? Are they somebody who can be ready at the drop of a hat? If they're not somebody who can be ready at the drop of a hat, you can't expect them to be somebody they're not. But if you get to know them, then you can figure out how to make it feel like it's happening just in the moment. Like, maybe I texted you all day, but you don't know when I'm coming home. And so you don't know when it's there's so many ways that you can make it happy for both people. And
the sexy surprise. The sexy surprise is powerful.
Yeah. Yes. But also, I hate surprises. So I want to know, like, that between like 6 and 8, I'm going to be surprised.
Surprising parameters.
Exactly.
6 and 6:03, Sabrina. You have a surprise.
Sorry.
Sabrina, what you were describing as like sort of this like tittillating, the text messaging and sort of the hint dropping and all that. I think that all lends itself to making someone feel really wanted. And for women specifically, and actually now I know it's true for men as well. And I'm imagining everyone in between, whichever gender or non-gender you identify as, it's the idea of feeling wanted, which is a big turn on.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that like kind of occurred to me only, and believe me, I'm sort of shocked at myself for not realizing that this was true of men, because I always think of men specifically. I'm a cisgender hetero woman. So like, I always think of men as just always ready. Like they'll just,
Yeah.
they're just always thinking with like the little head and all that. And it never occurred to me how important it is for men to feel wanted, because I know how important it is for me to feel wanted. And that's how I feel sexy, when someone
Yeah.
makes me feel like I'm beautiful, or they want me, or that it's not just, you know, like obligatory, or it's not just, you know, to satiate a physical need. That want is a huge part of it, but it goes for everyone really to make sex really great. How do we
Yeah.
make our partners feel wanted? And what you described is a great starter for all of
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you brought up men. I generally don't work with men, not because I, don't want to. I think there's a lot. I've had a lot of people be like, I think they could use some work. And I was like, I think we all could, but yes. Um, but I saw somewhere where somebody was saying that because men are not allowed to express emotions, they're allowed to connect through sex. And I was like, it just clicked something inside of me where it's like, that's the one sanctioned, socially place where a man can connect with another person on this like deep level. And so I also think it kind of started to change the way that I'm also heterosexual cis woman, and it kind of started to change the way that I even interact with I don't have one. Don't really have a partner, but sex partners at the time.
Maybe he's
Um,
listening to this right now and he's
uh,
coming for you, but not in a
yeah,
surprising way.
maybe. No, he can't come to me in a surprising way.
No
He lives in
surprising
another
way.
country.
6 to 8, 6 to 8.
Yes, from
6 to 8
6
days then,
p.m.
if it's another country.
Yeah. But I do think that it was, that thing where we do think of men as, always wanting it, always on. And so when it's the man in a relationship that is having the lower libido, I think in some ways that's even harder for them to talk about, for us as women to accept, because we're like, wait, my partner's a man. A man is supposed to always want me, and I
Right.
come home, and we need to care for them. Well, I would say as much as they care for us, so that it's equal, but also, in that way of trying to remember that they are still humans and they do still have emotions, and it's not just always going to be, yes, please take your pants off.
And to your point, we view a no as feeling rejected sometimes when
Yes.
often it has nothing to
Yeah.
do with us. Jen pointed out how both everyone has the need to feel wanted. They also have a desire to feel good in themselves, of themselves. So I notice when my dude's not working out regularly because he loves the gym, he doesn't have the same energy as he does
Yep.
when he is. It has nothing to do with me. It can impact me, but it has nothing to do with me. So when we are raised with ideas around, with shame around our sexuality, and then we get our first perceived rejection or no, or feeling like not enough, then that could spiral into this whole thought thing where we start talking about it less, playing less, showing up and doing it when it happens. But are we really showing up, or are we really just taking the scraps at that point? So I want people to end with this. By the way, you have to come back again and again because I know we're going to have people send us questions. But
I
I want
know.
people to leave this feeling excited and empowered about what's possible. So, true or false, even if somebody has been with their partner a really long time, they could still carve a new path, try a new toy, open their relationship up, play games. It could get wild and crazy, even if it never has been yet. True or false?
Yes. True, true, true. Like you can never stop learning somebody. And I think that is the joy of sex, is you can continue to learn, play, explore, and have fun. And I know I have to come back, but that is, kind of where I'll leave it for people.
You definitely have to come back, but don't leave them hanging. Tell the people where to find you in the meantime,
Oh,
but also find you back here.
yeah. So my website is Sexuality Without Shame. And I'm actually doing a bit of an overhaul there. So within the next couple of weeks, there will be a lot more resources. I'm going to put out a couple free guides and things like that for the people. And my Instagram is actually Sexual Empowerment Auntie, because I just want to be your auntie who you go to when you're like, Auntie, I have a question.
Love a
I
good
love it.
auntie.
Yes.
We are having you back soon. I think we'll actually put it out to our listeners to send us questions for the next round.
That'd be great. Yes.
We would love to have, and maybe we'll even take it further and have a Q&A with one or two of our listeners, have them call in.
Yeah.
But in any event, you have been an absolute pleasure. And I mean that non-sexually, but really, truly.
Yes, thank you.
Great and really informative. And I cannot wait until we continue this conversation in the next round.
I'm so excited to come back already. You just tell me when.
Me too. And I do mean it sexually.
Oh, yes.
Joanna, she's hetero. God, I thought we got
Well, hey, I'm not going to lie. Within the last couple of weeks, I've been questioning whether or not I truly am fully straight. So, Joanna, if you want to.
Well, not to drop any hints, but that's something we can explore, because I've had several people in my life recently switch sides. So
yeah,
it's definitely something that is on the table for many that they don't even realize until later in life.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 38 and it's just, I've always been like, I'm the straightest person ever. This last few weeks have been like, but hold on.
But I'm a little bendy.
They are quite hot and I am quite horny.
And on horny, I think we're calling
that's where we'll go.
That is the word we drop it on. Thank you so much, Sabrina. We'll talk to you again soon. Joanna, as always, a pleasure. And again, with you sexually, sorry. And thank you everyone for listening. Have a great night.